Hello, beautiful people of the internet. My name is Jacob, and the last couple of weeks have been weird. When I originally recorded the Iowa Chase video 14 days ago, I never could have expected the reception I got. I was expecting the realistic ceiling of that video to be about 2,000 views, with me being 200 of them. I originally wanted to do a video like this, where I broke down what happened to me on March 31st, but I put a lot of work into my Palmer, Iowa video from last year, and that got a little less than 1,000 views. So I didn't think it was going to be worth my time to put this much effort into this new video. You all had a different idea. Since then, I've qualified for AdSense. I've had multiple people reach out to me about licensing the video, and I was even interviewed by the BBC. I cannot tell you how amazed I am at all this. I am a no-name chaser from Oklahoma who has never done anything noteworthy on a chase, so the last couple of weeks have been truly mind-blowing. That said, a lot of people have pointed out, and correctly, I might add, that the title of the video does not quite match up with the video itself. Based on the video alone, it never seemed like I was in any kind of danger. So why would I add that disclaimer and say this is not how you're supposed to chase these kind of tornadoes? Several comments even went as far as to say I exaggerated what happened to me and that my video was nothing more than clickbait. To those who made those comments, I simply say, kinda. I never meant to intentionally mislead people, and my feelings about that day have not changed. I did put myself in danger. I did put myself into a position where I could have been hit by a large, potentially violent tornado. So let's go over what happened. What I did right, what I did wrong, why I was in Iowa to begin with, and what lessons can be learned from my mistakes on this day. I want this to be an educational experience for all of us, myself included, but especially newer chasers who want to learn how to chase safely. I have been storm chasing for about 9 years now. I've seen around 30 tornadoes in my day, but that does not mean that I know everything, and I still have a lot to learn. So, let's talk about the days leading up to the event and why I was even in Iowa to begin with. In the days leading up to the March 31st, the Storm Prediction Center had already started to highlight a large portion of the Midwest and the Mississippi Delta for potentially significant severe weather. This map shows the areas they were highlighting 6 days in advance, and then 5, 4, and 3. So they were pretty honed in on what was going to happen on the 31st. The day before the 31st, the Storm Prediction Center highlighted 2 areas of moderate severe risk. This is the second highest level the Storm Prediction Center has. One up here in southeast Iowa, northwest Illinois, and extreme northeast Missouri, and then one down here on the Arkansas, Tennessee, Mississippi, Missouri, and Kentucky borders. Southern risk was a tornado-driven moderate, while the north was more of a wind threat at this point, but there was already discussions of a significant tornado threat. Later that same day, the northern target's tornado risk was upgraded to a 15% hatch risk as well, creating a bimodal, significant tornado threat across the United States. So, if you're a chaser, you have to make a decision. Do I go north, or do I go south? For me, my decision to chase Iowa was more about the terrain than anything else. Having been in this area before, I knew that the terrain was pretty flat and the road network was good, especially in the Illinois, Iowa regions of the risk, so I was more confident that I would be able to see what was happening with the storms and have a better chance of tracking them in Iowa and Illinois. The southern risk had what we thought at the time the better chance for longer, stronger tornadoes, but I felt that the terrain down there and the lack of good road options was going to be a hindrance, so I decided to stick north. So I asked for Friday, March 31st off from work, feeling pretty confident in my northern target choice. Looking at the models, it really seemed that there was no bad place to set up in the northern target, as there were holistic tracks all up and down the risk area in an environment that should facilitate large, long track tornadoes in a prime environment. So I decided to go north and just see what happens. I left work Thursday night and traveled through Kansas City, finally stopping in Concordia, Missouri for the night. We waited anxiously for the day 1 update from the Storm Prediction Center to see what they were thinking, and when it dropped, the anticipation only grew. The outlook had not really changed, but there was a lot of discussion of long-track, potentially significant tornadoes and long-lived supercells within the moderate risk areas. Mentions of long-track supercells, numerous strong tornadoes, and an atmosphere that was primed for significant severe weather was expected. Somehow, I had to try to get some sleep, because I knew the next day was going to be intense. So you're me. You wake up in Concordia, Missouri, and now you have a decision to make. Where do I go? Obviously, you want to go to the current moderate to the north, right? I mean, that's what we had already agreed to. However, the Storm Prediction Center was feeling confident enough to combine the two moderate risks across the whole region, all of it being tornado-driven. So, I ask you, where do you go? Go ahead, pick a target based on what you're seeing here. This is where analysis paralysis can really begin. There's no way you can chase from central Iowa all the way down into Arkansas on the same day. Models and synoptics were pointing towards southeastern Iowa and northwest Illinois, so I was pretty set on that area, especially with the terrain there. My initial target was here in Quincy, Illinois. My thinking here is that I could be east of the Mississippi River, so I wouldn't have to worry about bridge crossings, and the terrain there was flat enough to where I could see for a long distance. I had to make a choice and stick with it, because there was no way I was catching up to these storms if I fell behind as they were moving around highway speeds. Also, I'd never chased Illinois before, so it would be kind of fun to knock another state off my list. As I was making my way to Quincy, I started to get worried that I was making the wrong decision. It is so easy to overthink on these kinds of days. The what-ifs take over, but you have to stick with a target. Again, you're not catching up to these things if you're falling behind. However, there is one image that made me change my mind and target Southeast Iowa, and it's this one. For those who don't know, this is an image of the surface vorticity, which is in blue, and the 0 to 3 kilometer mixed layer CAPE, or convective available potential energy, overlaying on top of each other. This image, which was taken around noon, was valid for 4 hours in the future, and it was showing this bullseye over southeast Iowa. This is a measure of how much spin is in the lowest levels of the atmosphere, as well as how much instability there is in the lowest 3 kilometers of the atmosphere. Basically, this is a measure of how much low-level spin can be stretched into the vertical. Storm chasers lovingly call this parameter the cheat code. Find the bullseye where the storms and cheat code are overlapping, and profit. Where the two overlap could be areas that maximize the spin and energy in the lowest levels of the atmosphere and could probably be your best chance at seeing a tornado. So, I'm going to Iowa. Not too long after 10:30 a.m., the Storm Prediction Center announced that they were going to upgrade the risk to a high risk, tornado-driven, in southeastern Iowa, northwestern Missouri. This is the highest threat level that the SPC can forecast. Let me tell you, there is a certain level of anxiety reserved for high-risk outlooks, and this would be the third high risk that I've chased, one in Oklahoma in 2017 and another in Oklahoma in 2019. A high risk basically means you're expecting numerous, long-track, strong to violent tornadoes over a large area. The southern target was also upgraded to a high risk, both of them being tornado-driven. And in the discussion, the Storm Prediction Center mentions violent tornadoes numerous times, which is very, very rare for them to do. At 11:45 that morning, the Storm Prediction Center issued a particularly dangerous situation tornado watch with almost maxed out probabilities of strong tornadoes. So, the stage was set. I'm going to southeast Iowa on a very volatile day with numerous strong to violent tornadoes being expected. So I had to be extremely careful. I was originally going to Mount Pleasant, Iowa to meet up with some friends, but by the time I got there, the storms were already firing in northern Missouri. So I had to set up somewhere to get ready. I saw this massive supercell coming out of northern Missouri, heading towards the town of Ottumwa, Iowa, which was right on the western fringes of the high risk. When I got to Ottumwa, I could tell that the storm was producing very large hail, but was ultimately struggling with creating a coherent mesocyclone. So, I needed to wait. In order to tell the story of what happens next, I downloaded my Spotter Network GPS locations from 3 to 5 p.m. on March 31st. I started out in Ottumwa, and I originally wanted to go south, but I could tell that the terrain and road network there were not good. Also, the storm was still struggling at this point. So I didn't want to be south of Ottumwa and have to drive through the town again in order to catch up to the storm. So I decided to shift my eyes more northeast of Ottumwa and set up there. I repositioned here near the small town of Agency and started to head north. At this point, it was becoming clear that the storm, which is down here somewhere, was really starting to ramp up its mesocyclone, so it was only a matter of time before the storm probably not only produced a tornado, but a strong one. As I was going north on Hendrick Road, which is this road right here, I stopped at this location on 160th Street to film the wall cloud that I was seeing. I was getting concerned that I was in the path of the storm, so I had to make a plan about where to go next. My idea was to head north towards Hedrick and then blast east on Highway 149 towards Martinsburg and then further if I needed to. This would give me plenty of options on how to position myself safely in front of the tornado and give me escape routes if I thought I was getting too close. I had plenty of time. I had given myself a lot of distance between me and the storm, so I wasn't worried. Yet. Soon after I started to go north again, I ran into hail, right around in this area. The original warning for the storm had baseball-sized hail, so I became worried that I was going to lose my windshield. So, in all honesty, I panicked. When I was in Iowa last year, I was really impressed by the road network and the gravel roads in rural areas, so I just assumed that every road out there would be safe to drive on. I was wrong. And in my panic, I turned east on 185th Street right here. This is 185th Street. This was a dirt road, and it had been raining that day. I was not sure how viable of an escape route this was, but when I looked back, the tornado had formed. I didn't realize it at the time, but I had just turned into the tornado's path. I also didn't realize that 185th Street ends in a T intersection, so I had to make the choice, do I go north or do I go south? I ultimately went south thinking that the tornado was going to miss me to my west. After a couple more turns, I was heading south towards the small town of Farson. As I'm heading south on this road towards Farson, this is when I started filming the actual tornado, which was down here at this point. Even as the tornado was getting closer, I thought I was fine. I had a good southerly option here. But that all changed when I saw the train. I never saw these train tracks while driving north, so I never realized I could be in a situation where a train could block my path out. My heart sank when that train beat me to this intersection right here by about 10 seconds. I was trapped. And I legitimately had the thought, this train just killed me. Ironically, it's the exact same train you can see later in the video. I had nowhere to go, so I found the southeasternmost point I could find in the town, and I just waited. Now the tornado was taking up basically my entire windshield at this point, and with all the trees and all the buildings, I could not really tell where it was going. As far as I knew, I was in the direct path of this thing. I didn't start filming again until I was more certain that the tornado was going to miss me to my north. A lot of the comments mentioned how calm and collected I was in the video. But the fact that I can hear my shaky breath and I say holy shit on camera tells me that I was completely terrified in those moments. As the tornado passed me to my north, I finally regained my composure, kept chasing it, and what you see in the video is basically what I filmed. As I kept chasing the storm, I did see the twin tornadoes, including the one that would later be rated EF4. I just didn't have the opportunity to film them as I was focusing on driving at that point. So, going back to the video title, why didn't I show where I was in danger? The fact is, I was worried about dying, and I didn't want to film my own death. I let the storms pass, and I knew my chase was done. After I had calmed down from everything, there was this strange mix of emotions. I was anxious, scared, and honestly ashamed about the actions that had put me in that situation. There's been a lot of talk of storm chasers being hit by strong to violent tornadoes recently, and the fact that I was almost one of them, I find to be extremely embarrassing. There was a part of me that didn't want to upload the video, because there was a part of me that didn't want to make it seem like I condoned my actions, when in fact the exact opposite is true. Still, I did post it because I wanted people to see what I had gone through. And I thought the disclaimer and description was going to be enough for that video. But then the YouTube algorithm caught it, and it went wild. The fact is, I was rewarded for making dumb decisions that could have killed me. So now I feel like I have an obligation to go over what happened, and to discuss my mistakes and how we could all improve as chasers so that you don't end up in the same position that I was in. First and foremost, I think my targeting on this day was pretty darn good. I saw an isolated supercell coming out of Missouri and moved into a position where I could maximize my opportunity to see any tornadoes that I would produce. I also talked myself out of going south of Ottumwa. It's really easy to get anxious in these moments, but sometimes you just have to wait. The storm was not ready to produce a tornado at that point, so if I had gone south of Ottumwa, I would have been caught in town, and there's no way I would have ever caught up to it. I also knew that the storms were moving very fast, so I tried to give myself plenty of time and distance between me and where the tornado could be, just in case I needed to take an escape route. Also, my plan of escape was almost perfect. Had I made it to the highway and gone east of Hedrick and Martinsburg, I would have been in a great position to film an awesome tornado and had the opportunity to escape if I needed to. One of my earliest mistakes can be seen here. I thought that if I could set up directly in front of the storm, I could safely chase it. Now, normally this is true on days where the storms are not moving highway speeds. I should have stayed further east to give myself more room between me and the storm. That way I could still get a great view, but if I needed to make an escape attempt, I would not be hindered by anything. I made another mistake in stopping to film the wall cloud. Yes, it was cool to see, but I had not established myself in a safe position yet. So I should have kept going until I hit Highway 149 and blasted east. Filming the wall cloud was cool, but what it actually did was it took away valuable time that I needed to get into a safe position. And if you're standing directly in front of the path of the storm, seconds matter. I also let the fear of losing my windshield override my self-preservation instinct. I've never lost a windshield before on a chase, and I did not want to start right now, which is a fine sentiment, but what I allowed myself to do was focus on preserving the glass and not my own safety. Another mistake I made was assuming that the road I was turning onto was fine. I did no analysis of the road, I had no idea where I was going, I had no idea that I was going to end up in a T intersection. I just panicked and took the first right I could find. I should have kept going north through the hail until I hit that highway, in which I would have had a much better option of where I was going to go. Had I become stuck on that road, as far as I knew, I was way too close to where that tornado was going to go. And when that tornado finally did cross that road, had I been stuck, it would not have been survivable. That was a strong tornado, and it would have thrown my car very easily. The most obvious way of showing my mistakes are this map right here. So what I did is I overlaid the tornado path onto this map here. Now this was just the core of the tornado. The National Weather Service in the Quad Cities determined that the width of this tornado was over 1,000 yards at maximum. Now I don't think it was quite 1,000 yards wide when I saw it, but let's give an estimate of 600 yards wide, and let's see how big that tornado is. So let's assume the tornado was 600 yards wide in the video. That means we could add this 600 yard wide circle around the path of the tornado. And I clearly drove through its path. This is a cardinal sin of storm chasing, and I believe this was my biggest failure on this day. I thought the tornado was going to move to my west, but I was too close to the path originally to really tell what it was going to do. I never saw the train tracks that would eventually stop me from going south in the town of Farson. It was just something I never thought about. I didn't consider it an obstacle because I didn't know it was there. I should have paid more attention. I should have noticed that train track was there and accounted for it in any path that I was going to take in the future. This was a complete oversight on my end, and I didn't even consider that this could be an obstacle. Any one of these mistakes is understandable and could have happened to anyone, but the series of mistakes that led up to me feeling like I was in a dangerous position are my own fault. I was not in a safe position, and I did not know how to get safe. So, what should I have done differently? The first and most important thing to discuss here seems fairly obvious. Don't drive into the path of the tornado. Well, you have to remember that storm chasers want to get close to the storms themselves. Close has a different meaning to every storm chaser you meet, but for me, this was too close and too dangerous. I've always been a conservative chaser, opting for wide shots of cool structure from a safe distance versus someone who has the thrill of zero metering these things. Tornadoes also wobble. The one slight jog in any direction could put you directly in the path if you're too close. Was I as close as I assumed to the tornado? Probably not, but I still had that very real fear that I was not going to survive this moment. It's not fun wondering if you could survive a direct hit from a tornado, so don't put yourself in a position where you have to be afraid of those thoughts. Secondly, get to your safe position first before you do any filming. I got distracted by the wall cloud, which cost me valuable time to get to my planned escape route. I knew I was directly in the path of this storm, yet I stopped to get footage of a wall cloud because I thought it was cool. Had I just waited until I got east of Martinsburg, I would have been in great position to see an amazing tornado from a safe distance with escape routes. Tying into this, know what your options are before you get there. I did not know anything about the roads I was getting onto when I was in a panic. Look at your maps before you get on any road while a storm is heading your way. The escape route might come to a dead end. It might suddenly become a mud road. It might get blocked by a river. There might even be a train blocking your path. The more you know, the safer you'll be. Also, don't let obstacles become obstacles. I never noticed the train tracks, and if I did, I could have planned for them. I should have asked myself, what if my escape route crosses these tracks and a train suddenly appears? I could have adjusted for that. And this holds true for any obstacles. Are you worried that a river might block your path and you'll be stuck trying to get onto the other side while chasing? Well, then get on the other side first. Don't want to mess with that town with all those stoplights? Get on the east or north side of that town. That way it won't become a problem. Did you notice a bridge might be out? Find another way around that bridge before the storms even fire. All of this can be safer if you just do a little bit of planning. Another thing that should be fairly obvious, but needs to be stated, is glass is replaceable, you are not. So if you're worried about making a choice between losing your windshield and getting out of the way of a tornado, just take the L on the windshield, pay for that later, but at least you'll know you are okay. And finally, there's no such thing as being too safe. I've been doing this a while, and I can think of a lot of instances where I could have been closer, or I could have had a better angle. And yes, it can be disappointing to realize you could have been closer, or you could have had a better shot, but I would rather you be disappointed in not getting that amazing shot versus someone finding your body in a field. No storm, video, image, or story is worth dying for. As I conclude here, let me tell you about my mental state after March 31st. I met up with some friends at a Steak and Shake in Iowa City, but on my way over there, I just needed to call my girlfriend. I needed to call her because I was really struggling with what had just happened, and I needed to hear a familiar voice. She was very supportive of me, and I cannot tell you how much it means to me that she still trusts my judgment when it comes to storm chasing. I hope to take her on more chases this year so that she can see her first tornado. I also called my mom to let her know what had happened. Again, she was also very supportive of me and just glad that I was okay. She's been with me on numerous storm chases and seen several tornadoes, and I hope that she can see more with me later on this year. At dinner, at the Steak and Shake with my friends, we all told our war stories, but the shame was lingering for me. It was great seeing my friends, but I was very harshly criticizing myself. I know better than this, and yet I let myself get into a position where bad things could have happened through a series of my own mistakes. On my way home, I didn't listen to music, a podcast, anything. I just sat there in silence, thinking about the day's events. One major thing that kept going through my head was when I was on that dirt road, looking back at this tornado that was getting bigger and bigger and bigger, I had the thought, if I die in this random field in Iowa, it could be days before my girlfriend, mom, friends and family ever find out what happened to me. When I got home on Saturday, April 1st, the first person I saw was my girlfriend. I was jovial and joking, ready to show her my footage. But the first time she hugged me, gave me a real big hug, all the emotions started coming to the surface, and I almost broke down crying right there. I went to a friend's birthday party that day, but when I got back to my girlfriend's place, right before bed, we were embracing each other. And in that moment, I couldn't contain it anymore. And I broke down sobbing in her arms. The thought of her getting that news that I had died in that field was just too much for me to handle. I promised her that I would do better in the future, and that's exactly what I plan to do. I also talked to a couple of friends who also had close calls with tornadoes, and discussing what had happened to me was just invaluable. And I'm so thankful that they were willing to sit down and share their stories with me. To all that I talked to, thank you. I've been seeing a therapist for several years now, and I suggest anyone and everyone try to do the same if you can. But he's been a great resource for me to figure out how to process what had happened to me. I've had 2 weeks to process everything, and now I'm okay with the idea of chasing again. But I will admit, there was some hesitation in the days following March 31st. All in all, was I as close to death as I thought I was? Probably not. But the fear that I felt was very real, and not something that I'm going to forget for a long, long time. Chasing can be done safely. Heck, getting close to tornadoes can be done safely. But you have to ask yourself, what level of risk are you willing to take? If you're not going to chase safely for you, chase safely for the people who care about you, for your loved ones, for your friends. Also think about the first responders who will be using valuable resources taking care of you when they could be utilizing that for the locals who had just been devastated. Again, there is no such thing as being too safe. Hopefully I explained why I chose such a dramatic title for my March 31st video. If you still think it's over the top, can I at least get a little bit of credit for changing the working title of How to Almost Get Killed in a Violent Tornado in Iowa? No? Well, I tried. Truthfully, this is the best tornado I've ever seen, and it takes its place at number 1 on my tornadoes list that I have personally seen with my own eyes. The second tornado was my first violent tornado ever, but I will admit I was selfishly hoping that they would keep the EF4 rating for the first tornado so that I could have a better story. Hey, it's just a better story to say I was almost taken out by an EF4. I cannot thank Glenn Johnson enough for letting me use his setup at his house to edit these videos. I promise to one day have my own equipment so I won't have to bother him to do these videos anymore, but he's been a great resource, and whenever the AdSense money does come through, he's getting a portion of it, so I cannot thank him enough. I am not a meteorologist, so if you want an in-depth review of what happened on this day, I would highly, highly suggest Convective Chronicles' YouTube channel and the video that he did on March 31st. Trey is a great resource, and anyone who's a weather nerd or anyone who's a storm chaser that is not subscribed to him, you're missing out. So subscribe to him, that's in the description below. And finally, thank you to everyone who supported me over these past 2 weeks. We're in a bit of a severe weather lull right now, but hopefully that's going to change soon. I look forward to bringing more chasing videos to you. I hope to see you all again. Thank you so much. Have a good one.